Fitzpatrick takes the snap, drops back, lobs it back right corner. Decker! He's got it! Touchdown! Eric Decker scores! And the Jets have won it in overtime!
This is the Jet Take with Ben Blessington and Kyle Fahey.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jet Take. I'm your host, Ben Blessington. Our 100th published episode. Probably recorded like 120.
Yeah.
But this is the 100th one that's actually going to get published on time. Well, thank you for listening. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Money, Kyle Fahey.
Yeah.
Kyle, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Ben. I'm actually super excited right now. This is the 100th episode. 100 podcast episodes under the age of 19 for both of us, right?
18. Yeah, I'm still 18. We're both still 18.
Well, you're not under the age of 18.
I guess.
Well, for me, I guess a personal achievement, 100 podcasts before the age of 18. I don't know what math that is, but I'm pretty sure that gets me in some sort of Hall of Fame, right?
Probably. I mean,
I'm crushing it out here.
Toys R Us, Hall of Fame.
They're shut down, but yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's wild to think of the amount of hours that we've spent over the past 2 or 3 years.
Too many.
Talking. Yeah, I spent way too many hours just talking to you, Kyle.
Yeah, it's probably like over 300 or 400 hours, like when you think about it.
Yeah, it's around 300, I would bet. Anyways, we'd like to thank, first of all, the listeners. Those who have stuck with us through some of our inconsistencies, because occasionally we'll upload late or we'll skip a week or whatnot. But for the most part, our listeners have stayed very consistent on Twitter or on iTunes or wherever they listen to the podcast. And we'd just like to thank you for continuing to listen to our show as you've listened to Kyle and I's voices drop throughout the years. We'd like to obviously give a big special thank you to turnonthejets.com. For picking up our podcast a little over a year ago. The growth that our podcast has undertaken from joining TOJ and joining the TOJ Digital Podcast Network is unbelievable. So we'd like to give a big thank you to Joe Caparoso and everybody at Turn on the Jets. And we'd like to give a big special thank you to all the guests that we've had on the show. I mean, we've had some pretty great ones. Darren Lee, Kelvin Beachum, Austin Safarian-Jenkins, Santonio Holmes, and the man that will be joined by next in just a minute, another friend of the podcast, Manish Mehta. They've all just really helped our base grow, and they've all been super kind and couldn't be better people. And we're just gracious enough that they have taken time to sit down and talk some Jets with us. While it is all sunshine and rainbows here at the Jet Take, in the actual world of New York Jets football, it is quite the opposite. The Jets are coming off one of the most pathetic losses that I've ever witnessed in my life, to be 3-7 Bills, and their newly signed quarterback, Matt Barkley, who just came off the street, learned a playbook in like 4 days, and put up 41 on us with 117 passer rating. So yeah, things are bleak for the 3-7 Jets after dropping 4 in a row. They head into their bye week. But I guess, and their star rookie quarterback is injured right now. I guess this is a good time to have a State of the New York Jets podcast with with an insider like Manish Mehta, and kind of break down everything that's going on with the Jets and the future that lies ahead. So I guess without further ado, or I guess I should very briefly mention, you can follow us at the Jet Take on Twitter. You can listen to our show wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search up the Jet. I realize I probably should do it before I bring it on. You listen to our show wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search up the Jet Take. Excuse me, and you can also find us on, as I mentioned earlier, turnonthejets.com. It's the best place to go for Jets content, and you can find our podcast there as well. So, Kyle, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Manish Mehta of the New York Daily News. We had him on at the start of training camp, I believe.
Yep. A couple months ago.
I think it was our most downloaded episode, or it was up there for sure. It was one of our most popular episodes, and maybe in my mind was probably our best episode we've done. It was
definitely our best.
And Manish Mehta.
Definitely our best. Darren might have gotten more downloads because we talked about uniforms that didn't happen, but nobody's telling anybody. I'm glad you like that one.
Hey, they're happening now.
They're happening now. Manish, on the next episode of One Jets Drive, apparently, is when we're seeing them.
Yeah, well, they went to, you realize the Nike headquarters is down the street from my old high school.
Whoa, where you used to live. Yeah,
it was wild. I was like, I really wish I just knew they were there. But, Manish, thank you so much for joining our podcast. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. So first and foremost, congratulations. I think I did exactly 0 podcasts before the age of 19, so you guys are really ahead of the game, and I'm honored to be a part of the 100th podcast. Unfortunately, the team's not doing that great, but I guess on the flip side, there's a lot of things to talk about.
So I guess it makes for better content, I guess.
Yeah, if you're writing for the biggest paper in the state of New York right now, and you didn't have a podcast before 19, that means I'm like solving nuclear war, right? Like I'm ending any world hunger or anything. I mean, I feel like that's what I'm on track for.
Well, were you guys born after 2000?
I was born in 2001.
I was born in 2000.
I was born in 2000. I'm old enough to be both your fathers.
Yeah.
That's quite odd.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the
I'm curious. You talk about the state of despair that the New York Jets are in right now. When you write for a paper like the New York Daily News, do you prefer or do you think it's better when the Jets are doing exceptionally well? Think of the 2009-2010 days, or is it more interesting as a writer when there's just a state of influx at the moment?
I actually like it when the team's doing well, because when I covered the 2009 and 2010 playoff runs, I don't think I enjoyed myself more than those 2 years, especially down the stretch, and probably most especially in the postseason. I got a lot of good memories from those post-game locker rooms. I remember specifically in San Diego after the Jets beat the Chargers and talking to Sean Green and Mark Sanchez, and it was just kind of a cool environment to be in, everyone's in a good mood. The team is successful, so people that you like inside the building, in the locker room, and in other parts of the organization, you see them work hard and you see them find success. And for me personally, I really enjoy that. Now, I will say when things aren't going well, that doesn't mean that there isn't lack of content, but just typically, being around this team for, I guess, full-time for about 10 years and, on and off for about 15 years, I've always found that, these November and December stretches, when you're out of it, are pretty bleak and kind of depressing, to be perfectly honest with you. Look, I'm not a fan of the Jets. I'm not from New York, but just being in that environment, losing environment is tough for, players, coaches, front office, and even reporters.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we all wish we could go back to the days of the AFC Championships. But, hopefully Sam Darnold can take the Jets there at some point. Well, let's talk about this team, because obviously heading into the season, there was a lot of positive buzz. After Week 1, there was probably the most positive buzz I've heard about the Jets since their Week 16 win against the Patriots in 2015. What's happened the last 4 or so weeks? The tune has just definitely shifted. I mean, even a few weeks ago, coming off that Broncos game, there was a lot of positive energy surrounding the team about Sam Darnold and where the team can go. But the past 4 weeks, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, and then I guess last week defensively, I mean, just what has happened to the team? How would you describe, I guess, the vibe around the locker room, and I guess who's to blame for these 0-4 the past 4 weeks?
Well, I don't think there's one culprit. Anytime you go through a rough stretch, of course, the head coach is going to get the most blame, and frankly, Todd Bowles deserves the most blame. When things are going well, he's going to get a lot of credit, but he's not the only culprit here. As you touched on, the offense has really struggled the last 3 games that Darnold played, and of course, last week or a couple days ago when Maccagnan played. I don't think that people, and maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but my vibe is that people aren't necessarily upset at Sam Darnold. They kind of expected that it would be a roller coaster and that he would have to experience new things and go through some struggles before hopefully ultimately coming out of the tunnel the right way by the end of the season. I just think that there's, just based on the information that I have, there's some consternation inside the organization about a lack of an ability, or maybe not a lack of an ability, but just an inability to adjust in game. And that goes not only on the offensive side of the ball, but the defensive side of the ball as well. There have been some wrinkles that the Bills and the Dolphins 2 weeks earlier and the Bears 3 weeks earlier, some wrinkles that they showed on both sides of the ball that the Jets didn't necessarily prepare for, but could have easily adjusted to if they decided to adjust. And I can't answer the question as to why they didn't adjust, but there were some things in each of those games from what I've been told that kind of popped up, and I don't want to say out of nowhere, but clearly things that they didn't necessarily prepare for, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't adjust to, that they didn't adjust to, if that makes any sense. So, I know that there's frustration in the building over that, and that's come into focus over these last 4 weeks, but I think it's kind of been prevalent all season. And if you look at each game, as I know you guys have, you've noticed that something different seems to pop up virtually every week. Someone different is making a mistake, or it's a different kind of mistake. 1 week it's pre-snap penalties. 1 week it might be boneheaded personal foul issues. 1 week it might be players not having the awareness to go after a loose ball, like in Minnesota on that lateral to Stephon Diggs, in which Perry Nickerson and Darren Lee kind of fell asleep at the wheel. So there's something that there's something different that kind of crops up every single week, and that has been the source of frustration. And you have to ask yourself, well, who's culpable? Is it the player? Is it the coach? Is it the coaching staff? So that's really kind of been how this season has unfolded. So I don't think that the record necessarily is something that fans are ticked off about. I mean, nobody wants to be 3-7, of course, but I think it's the way that they've lost these games and some of the the issues that have cropped up in game that have ultimately led to the frustration, not only in the fan base, but from inside the organization as well.
Couple things I would like to hit on there, because I think you made some really good points, and then one bad one. The bad one is, if you think we actually sit there and watch the whole game after those bullcrap performances, I have tears in my eyes, usually by the third quarter. I definitely miss some snaps every now and then, so that's bold of you to assume. That's bold of you to assume I watch all those. But the good points that I 100% agree with is that the Jets are inconsistent at being inconsistent. Not one person is the problem, which is rare for the Jets. It's usually, Darryl Roberts can't run with Martavis Bryant and Marcus Wheaton in Pittsburgh. Or Darrelle Revis slouches all the time and he can't make a tackle, or whatever it may be. This year just seems that at the most inopportune times, guys aren't ready, guys aren't aware, guys aren't prepared, and I think, as you said, there's some growing frustration inside and outside with this fan base, and I think, as you said, that goes onto the shoulders of Todd Bowles, and what also sits on the shoulders of Todd Bowles is his head, and I think it might start to roll pretty soon. Heads are going to have to get chopped off eventually. So the question is for you. I do think they already would have done it by now, but is there any chance that Todd Bowles gets fired in this bye week?
No, he's not getting fired during the bye week. Not at all. I just want to circle back to something you had mentioned about preparing, and something I had actually said as well. You always hear, at least this season, players said that they were prepared, and I think that's true. In fact, I'm fairly confident that that's accurate, that the Jets do prepare well. So it's not as if Jeremy Bates and Todd Bowles are not preparing the team properly. It's the in-game adjustments that have been lacking. So, after the game, I think players are being honest. I think they were prepared, but when you have to make changes on the fly in order to, again, fix things that you might not have seen, or maybe, not have seen as much of, I think that's the issue with the coaching staff. So when players say they were prepared and people roll their eyes and say, well, they clearly weren't prepared, they lost 41-10 or 37-17, whatever. I think they actually do prepare. I don't think that is really the issue. The issue is making proper adjustments during the course of the game, and that clearly has been lacking. And I don't think you're going to get players or Todd Bowles or Jeremy Bates to publicly admit that, but I'm 99.9% sure that has been the case this season.
Well, I think you just have to look at the Browns game when we weren't prepared for Baker Mayfield, when I feel like everybody in the nation knew that it was a real possibility that Baker was going to step on that field. And then making Matt Barkley look like Jesus walking on water definitely didn't help the idea that Todd Bowles has his individuals prepared on the field.
Well, this is what I'll say about Baker Mayfield, and I don't know if I've discussed this before, but this is what happened with Baker Mayfield. It's not that they weren't prepared for Baker Mayfield. I know that Jamal Adams maybe came out and said something along those lines. It's that in the run-up to that game, and when I say that, I mean not only the first 2 weeks of the regular season, but all off-season, all training camp, the Jets' defense had success in practice against Sam Darnold by playing coverage and not blitzing, and that gave Sam Darnold issues. And even if you look at this season as it has unfolded, Sam Darnold has had issues when teams play coverage. He's actually not that bad when teams blitz because he's got the mobility to escape pressure and make plays happen, or just sit in the pocket and make something happen. What has given him some problems in this first half of his rookie season is when teams play coverage. So the Jets figured when Baker Mayfield came into the game that because Darnold, as a rookie, a talented rookie, was having these issues against coverage all off season, that they could take a similar tack against Baker Mayfield and not blitz him and play coverage. But anyone who's really seen Baker Mayfield play in college knows that if you play coverage against Baker Mayfield, he will beat you, and that's clearly what happened in the second half of that game. So that game, even though Sam Darnold missed open guys in the deep part of the field, because there were opportunities in that game to hit home runs, and Sam Darnold at that point, in his third career game on a short week, he was much more comfortable in the short to intermediate areas of the field. He did not pull the trigger down the field. So even though he was partly at fault, the biggest culprit, to be perfectly honest with you, in that particular game was Casey Rogers' decision to play coverage against Baker Mayfield, and to a similar degree, perhaps a little bit less, because they were splitting play calling duties at that point. Todd Bowles signing off on that because Todd Bowles is way too smart of a defensive coach to sign off on that, and that was a mistake by Bowles, a mistake by Rogers, and that's what ultimately cost him that game.
Let's talk about the front office a little bit, because it sounds like most of the coaching staff is going to be safe for at least the time being. I'm going to guess the remainder of the season at this point. It doesn't seem like Chris or Woody Johnson's MO to fire somebody, off a couple bad games, basically, even though they probably deserve the axe. The front office, Mike Maccagnan, I'm a big Maccagnan guy, and I'll admit it, I'll man up right now. His picks have not really been hitting. Nathan Shepard not really hitting. Trenton Cannon can't field a punt. Justin Burris not even around anymore, right? They're just guys who we have picked in the mid-rounds. Basically, if you weren't a first-round pick, it seems like you're not being productive for the Jets, an exception to Robbie Anderson and Brandon Shell. Is there any chance we see Mike Maccagnan's head rolling?
I don't think that Mike Maccagnan is going anywhere. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but at this point, and I don't see why anything would change over the final 6 games, because he's a general manager. There's not really much he can do over the final 6 weeks. But I know that ownership is. I think they're content. They're happy enough to go forward with him. What's interesting is that if indeed they do make a coaching change, the moment that happens, you are committing to Mike Maccagnan through 2021. Because if you look at this logically, Mike Maccagnan would head the coaching search if there's going to be a coaching search, and obviously ownership has to sign off on it. But this would be a Mike Maccagnan head coach, for lack of a better phrase. And if you do that, you're not going to fire your head coach, barring something catastrophic off the field. You're not going to fire him the first 2 years. You're going to keep him for at least through that third season, which is 2021, if you hire him in 2019. Now, Mike Maccagnan is signed through 2020, so they would have to give him an extension at some point through 2021. So the question becomes, if you're a Jet fan or somebody who follows the team, are you confident with Mike Maccagnan sticking around for 3 more years? Because, in effect, that is what is going to happen if Todd Bowles is fired. They are not going to be in a situation where Mike Maccagnan hires the head coach in 2019, and then ownership says, well, Maccagnan's not doing a good enough job, so after 2019 we're going to fire him. Because at that point, you put yourself in a very similar position as to what this franchise put itself in a few years ago when John Idzik inherited Rex Ryan. And you cannot have a general manager inherit a head coach. It doesn't work. You have competing timelines, and then ultimately things go south, and nobody knows that better than Woody Johnson. He saw it firsthand several years ago. So you're going to be committing to Mike Maccagnan for at least 3 more years. And you talked about the draft picks. They're all valid points. Nobody can hide from the picks. If you just look at the picks from the moment that he was he was hired. The first-round picks have been 3 of the 4, I think, are going to be very good players. Darren Lee clearly has shown improvement, but was he
podcast?
Right, yeah, was he worth a first-round pick? No, he was not worth a first-round pick. But there is something that doesn't get discussed that often. I'm not sure how much fans really know this, or other people that cover the team really know this, but because of the reporting structure, and I know you guys are aware that both the head coach and the general manager have parallel reporting structures to ownership, so it's not as if Todd Bowles reports to Mike Maccagnan. Because of that, Maccagnan has taken an approach to this point in which he's been very collaborative because, again, if there's something that Todd Bowles doesn't necessarily agree with or like, he can go directly to ownership. He doesn't answer to Mike Maccagnan. So what I will say about Maccagnan, and I know this firsthand from talking to people throughout the organization, for the last 4 years, is that he's been very amenable to working with the coaches, and perhaps too much so. And anyone who knows Mike Maccagnan, has been around Mike Maccagnan, knows that he's a very pleasant guy. He's an extremely nice person. I think he wants to make everybody happy, and when I say everybody, I mean the coaching staff and the front office. So I'll give you an example. You talk about Ardarius Stewart. He's in the news today because he signed with the Oakland Raiders practice squad, right? 3rd-round pick, horrible pick, right? 79th overall.
Terrible.
9 or 8 picks before Kareem Hunt, about 6 or 7 picks before the kid down in the kid from Penn State, the receiver at Tampa.
Chris Godwin.
Yeah, Chris Godwin, right. I mean, awful pick. Okay. Well, I can tell you with a 1,000,000% certainty that pick was a coach's pick. That was not a Mike Maccagnan pick. Now, he bended to the coaches. Specifically, that was a player that John Morton wanted badly. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. He wanted Ardarius Stewart badly. So Mike Maccagnan does have final say of the draft. He does have control of the 53-man roster per his contract, but he has gone out of his way, I think too much so, to be perfectly honest with you, to appease the coaches. And the one thing I'll say about not only Mike Maccagnan, but every general manager, and this is no disrespect to Todd Bowles, John Morton, or any coach in the league, coaches are really not good evaluators of college players because they are not a part of the process until the 11th hour. The general manager in this particular case, who's got a scouting background, and the scouts in the front office, they're the people that invest all of the time, the year, the 2 years plus, in studying these players and going to these schools and talking to coaches and talking to other contacts and sources about these players' background. They do 95% of the legwork, and then when draft time rolls around, after the season is finished, that's when the coaches jump into the process and they fall in love with players. I saw it firsthand with Rex Ryan falling in love with Quentin Coples, and Mike Tannenbaum acquiesced and said, okay, look, my coach really loves this guy, so I'm going to take this guy. Maybe my scouts don't necessarily share that belief, but I'm going to go with my head coach because I believe in my head coach and we work together and we're a team. And I think that Mike Maccagnan, frankly, has done too much of that. It does go both ways. It's not just the coaches are always wrong, because I will also tell you that the coaches wanted Mike Maccagnan to trade up. And I don't know if you guys remember this. I'd written about it at the time. It's not going to make any Jet fan happy, but the coaches specifically wanted Mike Maccagnan to trade up for Alvin Kamara, and he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to give up the premium draft pick, and ultimately that was the bad call because now Alvin Kamara is probably one of the top 3 or 4 best dual-threat running backs in the NFL. So it does cut both ways, but I know that guys like Ardarius Stewart, if you want to look at this past draft, without getting into too many details, like if you one guy, for example, Trenton Cannon. Trenton Cannon was a coach's pick. It was a late-round pick, but that was a coach's pick. That was not a Mike Maccagnan pick.
That makes sense.
There's a few other guys that I don't want to get into right now, but I just think, frankly, and I don't know if this is going to happen moving forward. I do know that if there is a coaching change, the great likelihood is that the new coach will report directly to Mike Maccagnan. Regardless, I do think that Mike Maccagnan needs to be I mean, I don't want to curse, but he needs to be more of a bad guy here. I think
you can curse. It's fine.
I think he needs to be more of a prick.
Last week's episode.
Yeah, look, I think he needs to be more of a prick. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Come on. I think that's the cleanest thing we've ever said on this show.
Right. I mean, I think he needs to have a hard line in the sand, specifically with the draft. I mean, pro free agency is a little bit different because coaches are exposed to these players week in and week out. They've seen guys in the league. They have a better handle and a better sense of the quality of player and what that player might be able to do in their system. But when it comes to the draft and college players, this is the primary reason that Woody Johnson hired Mike Maccagnan, because of his depth and breadth of knowledge throughout the last 2 decades in studying college players. So I know that Maccagnan, wanted to have a collaborative effort here. But when it comes to the draft, if you have a strong conviction on a player, one way or the other, just don't get swayed by the coaches. Again, this is no disrespect to Todd Bowles because again, the coaches wanted Kamara, and that ended up being the right pick. But too many times over the past 4 years, from everything that I have gathered, coaches have wanted guys. The general manager has kind of bent to their wishes, and ultimately it hasn't worked out.
Okay. You were talking about picks. I don't know if you can give me this, but I really have to know. Was Lachlan Edwards on Mike Maccagnan or Todd Bowles' pick?
I have to ask about that. I don't really count kickers and punters. He turned out to be a good pick, right?
He's a good punter. That Aussie's got a leg on him. And then also, the reports were that John Edzik was in the building for the Bills game. I got to know.
Yeah.
That was real?
Oh, yeah. They have him doing some advanced scouting. You have personnel guys from teams across the league every week going to future opponents. And, John Idzik was there. God bless him. He did a little bit of that. John Schneider actually had him do a little bit of that in Seattle before he got the Jet GM job. So, guys got to make a living, right?
Yeah, I figured that Tom Coughlin didn't want to take a trip back to the Meadowlands, so I guess John Idzik's next in line.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you learn from experience, and hopefully he's getting good experience watching some of these guys play.
Yeah, really interesting stuff here that you've touched on, Manish. Quite frankly, the draft stuff, and specifically the Ardarius Stewart pick, is quite frankly going to cause quite a stir among Jets Twitter. I'm curious though. You talk about you don't really expect Maccagnan to be fired. If you had to put percentages on Bowles and Maccagnan, their job security, I mean, obviously Bowles is, as you talked about, more in jeopardy. I mean, what percent chance would you say that Todd Bowles is fired and then Mike Maccagnan at the end of the year? Because some people have noted, and whether it's incorrectly or not, that if the Jets had fired Bowles this week, it would pretty much all but commit to Mike Maccagnan in the future because you wouldn't separate the coach and the GM at that point. If you're going to clean house and fire both of them, you'd probably do them together at the end of the year. So some people believe that Mike Maccagnan could still be in the chopping block. Obviously, you have more knowledge on the situation. So if you had to say percentages on Todd Bowles being fired, who sounds like obviously the more likely of the two, and then the slim chance that Mike Maccagnan is fired, what would you put it at?
Well, I was told last week that there was a quote-unquote foregone conclusion that they'll be looking for a new head coach after the season. So, it's somebody that I trust, somebody that would know. So I'll just leave it at that. And I was
that works for us.
Yeah, I was also told that ownership is, I don't remember what the word was that I used earlier, but I think they're pleased enough with Mike Maccagnan. I don't believe that they're prepared to blow it all up. There is a real factor here is that the owner of the football team is in London right now. And, Woody Johnson, I think it would be very difficult for the Jets to start over and hire a new general manager and head coach and then have Woody come back in 2020. It's an open-ended appointment, typically.
Hopefully.
Typically, ambassadorships like that, they last through the first term of the presidency. In some cases, it could only last 3 years if you want to groom somebody else, for that final year of the first term, and if indeed the president is reelected, that guy would have a head start at the beginning of the second term. But it is open-ended. So, look, I don't think that that's been determined yet. In fact, I know that hasn't been determined yet as to when Woody Johnson will come back. If you look at how the contracts for Maccagnan and Bowles were structured, they were both extended through 2020. I think it's reasonable to assume that Woody Johnson would be back, at that point. I just think that the way that the organization views this, state of the franchise is that year one they poured in a lot of money to try to win in the here and now with the older players in free agency, and that clearly didn't work. I think they obviously made a mistake, waiting on Ryan Fitzpatrick and paying him a little bit too much money than he probably deserved. Even though I thought they should have brought him back. In hindsight, clearly they should not have brought him back, but they didn't have a viable alternative because Christian Hackenberg stinks. So it's not like they could develop him. So they were in a difficult situation, and there were people that were fine with bringing back Fitzpatrick. There were people that, frankly, wanted no parts of Fitzpatrick, regardless of how well he played in 2015. So they're looking at this rebuild as 2016 was year one, 2017 year two, now you're in year three, and you've got a lot of money to kick off year four, and that's the year where you really got to make things happen. And that's why it's a really interesting discussion about Maccagnan's future, because, again, I don't want to say never, because you do have 6 weeks before the season ends, and as I said earlier, even though there's nothing that Mike Maccagnan can truly do to change ownership's mind, ownership is well within their rights, of course, to change their mind. So I never want to say there's a 0% chance that he'll be fired, but I would be very stunned, to be perfectly honest with you, if he were fired. I think the much greater likelihood is that Mike Maccagnan will be heading up the coaching search in January. If I were a betting man, I'd put down a lot of money on that likelihood in that scenario. But what's fascinating to me is that Maccagnan has all this money to spend. It's year four. Ownership has an expectation that they're going to be a viable playoff contender. And there can't be a playoff mandate because you're committing to the GM for 3 years after he hires a new head coach. So it's an interesting dynamic. They are putting in their resources. I will be very interested, frankly, to see if ownership does indeed give Maccagnan the green light to spend. Because even though they have a lot of cap space, $95, $100 million, whatever it is, the key point in free agency is how much cash are you willing to spend. Because when you guarantee money to players, you put that money in escrow, and the only way to put money in escrow is to actually have money to put in escrow and have a willingness to put money in escrow. So cap space sounds great, and fans love to talk about it. That's not really the point. The point is that they have a lot of cap space, but will they be willing to spend the cash? And that's an answer that only Woody and Christopher Johnson have right now. Those are that's going to be pivotal. If they're going to give Mike Maccagnan a real opportunity here to accelerate this rebuilding or building process, they're going to have to allow him to spend money and guarantee money to free agents. I think that'll happen. I can't tell you with certainty that will happen. I think it's more to be determined, but I know that there's people in the organization who are cautiously optimistic that will happen.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it just seems like this is a whole mess. That the Jets really back in 2015 should have just hired Maccagnan and then had him choose a head coach, because it seems like part of the issue could be, I mean, you've talked about that he's actually been, very amenable to Todd Bowles and the coaching staff, but it seems like part of the reason that this, the Jets are in this situation is there hasn't really been a clear hierarchy. Two quick questions on this. I guess we'll start with one. If you said yourself that, from somebody you trust, that it is most likely a foregone conclusion that Todd Bowles will not be the head coach of the Jets next year. Then why didn't the Jets fire him this week? Why didn't they fire him Monday? After four straight pathetic losses, and specifically the game against the Bills, after all the heat he got after the Dolphins game, he comes out and allows 41 points to one of the worst teams in football and a free agent quarterback. Why wasn't Todd Bowles fired? Do they just not have any confidence in any of the guys on their staff, such as Carl Durrell or Rick Dennison or Denard Wilson or Casey Rogers? Or is it one of those things where they just feel more comfortable moving on towards the end of the year? Because, I mean, while the Jets don't have Greg Williams, not that he's an amazing head coach, the Browns did make the coaching switch in the middle of the season, and they certainly seem, or I guess Baker Mayfield certainly seems to be doing a little bit better under a change in coaching. So why do you think the Jets decided why do you think the Jets have decided to wait till the end of the year until they make a head coaching move?
Yeah, that's a fair question, and it's a question that I think that fans should ask I think it'd be weird if fans didn't ask that question. There's a number of reasons. First, well, I don't want to say first, but it's the first one I'll bring up. I'm not saying it's the most important part of the answer, but one of the reasons is that I believe that there was a concern that things could actually get worse because the players genuinely do like Todd Bowles. They do believe in Todd Bowles. It might not look like that based off of what we just saw a few days ago against Buffalo, in which it looked like they laid down and quit, and in which I think Mo Claiborne actually said that they laid down. But I think there's a concern that the players like this guy. Maybe they'll galvanize and play for him and end the season on a good note, on a high note, as a transition after the season, in all likelihood. There's also a real concern that there isn't a viable replacement to be the interim head coach. The guys, that you'd mentioned, Rick Dennison, obviously been a long-time coordinator in this league. Carl Durrell had been a coach, but that was at UCLA, so nobody with prior head coaching experience in the NFL. And there's the thought that, look, everybody might just pack it in. Bowles is gone. Players might pack it in. It's a young, impressionable group in that locker room. Maybe they'll just pack it in. The rest of the coaching staff, and even though I think that the rest of the coaching staff has probably got an eye toward their own futures right now, regardless, if Bowles is gone, then what's the preparation going to be like? Todd Bowles is also the defensive play caller. Who is going to call plays? It's not going to be Casey Johnson all alone. Believe me, that would not be. I think the Jets are in a much better position with Todd Bowles calling the plays. Let's put it that way. So there's a ripple effect here. On the defensive side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, you clearly don't want Jeremy Bates to be elevated to be interim head coach, because that would divert some of his attention away from Sam Darnold. And even though it looks like Jeremy Bates will not be coaching Sam Darnold next year, there are still 6 games left. We'll see how many games Darnold actually plays. But you do want some stability around this guy. I mean, he is the centerpiece of your franchise, the most important player, hopefully for the franchise for the next 10 to 15 years. So I think minimizing disruption around him was a factor. So there were myriad reasons why they didn't do it. I know fans, they want their pound of flesh. They want Todd Bowles out. But let's be honest. If Todd Bowles were out, this isn't going to energize the fan base. Are fans going to suddenly show up in droves over the last 3 home games because Carl Durrell or Rick Dennison is the interim head coach? Absolutely not. It's going to be a half house, if they're lucky, at MetLife Stadium over these final 3 home games, regardless of who the head coach is. So I just think that because of the fact that the decision makers truly believe that the players like this coach, that they're going to do their best and play their hardest over these last 6 games and hopefully get a good feeling, at some point over these last 6 games, and maybe use that to feel good about themselves. But there isn't a concrete reason other than they believed that it would cause more disruption if they made a change. And to be honest with you, I got a lot of respect for Todd Bowles. I always have, and I always will. And I got a lot of respect for the people who coach, with him and for him. But in some ways, if you're being honest about the situation, the fact that they didn't feel confident about perhaps getting rid of him and elevating someone else, that's really an indictment on the coaching staff. The organization looks at it, the decision makers look at it, I believe, as an indictment on the quality of the coaching staff. And ultimately, they're the decision makers for a reason. I'm not a decision maker, so I can't, I'm not going to tell you that I agree or disagree with that, but they clearly did not believe that, it would be a smart move to move on from this coach with 6 games to go. And I don't believe that they're going to. That being said, if they're losing the next 2 or 3 games by 30, 40 points and they are quitting and they are laying down, well, then everything's off the table. And then I think they just might be like, the hell with it. Let's just move on. But it will be interesting to see how the players come out of this bye week, and having such a daunting test against an angry and well-rested Patriot team. Coming off a loss, I don't think anyone expects them to win. But if they play hard and they're competitive and they don't quit, I think really at this point that's all you can ask for.
All right, last question on this this coaching staff front office, and then we're going to pivot towards Darnold and free agency and whatnot. But you talk about, okay, if you had to guess, it seems like Maccagnan's going to stay, Bowles is going to be fired, and Maccagnan is going to be the one, heading up the search to find the Jets' next coaching staff. If you had to take a guess on the type of coach that the Jets are going to hire, or any names that come to mind that you think Maccagnan could be potentially intrigued by, obviously we've heard, Lincoln Riley. There's been reports that John Harbaugh and the Ravens are heading for a mutual split. John DeFilippo, the Vikings offensive coordinator, former Eagles QB coach. Matt Campbell from Iowa State. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there, kind of some intriguing young offensive minds. It certainly seems that the Jets will go offensive after going defensive so many times in a row, and with a rookie quarterback like Darnold, it seems like you want an offensive guy looking over him. Are there any names that come to mind that you think Mike Maccagnan could be intrigued by?
Well, let me say this, and I've said a lot of dumb things, so let me just preface it by saying I've said a lot of dumb things before, but I will walk to Nebraska if Lincoln Riley somehow becomes the Jets head coach.
That's going to be like Hugh Jackson swimming in, what was it? What lake was he in?
What's that?
He jumped into the lake, Hugh Jackson.
Yeah, Hugh Jackson was like,
yeah, right. Lincoln Riley will not be the New York Jets' next head coach. Lincoln Riley is not it's not. And look, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. It's not because the Jets wouldn't be extremely intrigued by Lincoln Riley. Maybe they'll even interview Lincoln Riley. I think, based on everything that I know, I would be floored and completely stunned if Lincoln Riley has any desire to coach in New York. I don't think that's part of his makeup. I don't think he has any interest in coaching in New York. I think if he takes any head coaching job, he's going to have to sit down with Jerry Jones and have an understanding about what kind of control and what kind of autonomy he has with the Cowboys. Because if he goes to any team, if he makes that leap from college to the NFL, it's going to be with the Cowboys. I don't even think it's Cleveland. I don't think there's even though he loves Baker Mayfield, and a reunion with Baker Mayfield would be a pretty cool story. I firmly believe that if he is going to make that jump from college to the pros, it'll be to the Cowboys. I hate saying the guy's not cut out for New York, because it makes it seem like the guy is soft. Because I don't want to say that. I've never spoken to Lincoln Riley in my life before, but just based on people that know him, I don't think he has any interest in coaching in New York City or New Jersey or whatever. I don't think it's going to happen. The other thing that I will caution, not only with Lincoln Riley, but with other college coaches, and this discounts Jim Harbaugh. Of course, he's a different animal altogether. But with college coaches, and this isn't a sexy topic of conversation because fans just want to know who's the head coach, who's going to be the face of the franchise. That's important, yes. But what gets lost many times when you talk about college coaches making that jump to the pros is what kind of staff are they going to put together. That is so incredibly important because most college assistant coaches, they're not really that good coaches, to be honest with you. They're in place because they're great recruiters, because they can get talent, not because they can necessarily, coach the X's and O's and be great assistant coaches in the NFL. And that's where the problem lies so many times when you have a career college coach making the jump to the NFL. So I would caution any Jet fan, Brown fan, Buccaneers fan, Ravens fan, Packers fan, all these fans who are going to be looking for coaches in the off season. I would caution that, Lincoln Riley's name, for example, might sound sexy and he might have some great offensive concepts in his head, but none of that stuff matters if you don't have a quality staff. And that's why, I'm not saying that the Jets would not go that route. I would be surprised, frankly. I don't want to rule it out, but that's a real obstacle and a real consideration when you're going through any kind of head coaching search. As far as the other guys go, John Harbaugh to me is an incredible CEO and an incredible leader. However, if you hire John Harbaugh, no matter who you are, whatever team you are, if you hire John Harbaugh, you have to make sure that you pair him with a really good offensive mind, because John Harbaugh does not call plays. He has never called plays. He was a special teams coach in Philly when he got the job with the Ravens, and he's a great leader, great CEO, great motivator, smart guy, great face of the franchise, just really a smart football man, but he's not a play caller, not an offensive play caller or a defensive play caller. So you need, for purposes of this conversation, if you're talking about the Jets, you would need to pair him with an offensive coordinator that you believe could groom and develop Sam Darnold the right way. Because if you do look at John Harbaugh's history in Baltimore, he has really cycled through a lot of different offensive coordinators. He goes through offensive coordinators like candy, and he's got Marty Morningwig, which I know Jet fans are familiar with right now. So I would just say that is a consideration when you're talking about John Harbaugh. All that being said, if he is ultimately going to be let go by the Ravens, and I think he will be, because I think Eric DeCosta is going to want to hire his own guy after he gets promoted when Ozzie Newsome kind of steps aside. I think that Harbaugh's not going to be available very long. He's going to be, in demand because he does have a proven track record, and again, he's a great leader of a franchise. The other guys, I think you mentioned John DeFilippo. John DeFilippo, I think, is going to have his fair share of opportunities. Frankly, I thought he might get the head coaching job last year. Just because of the tremendous work he did in the early part of Carson Wentz's career. Clearly, Kirk Cousins is playing. The team might not be playing lights out, but Kirk Cousins is playing well. So I think DeFilippo is an intriguing. He's an intriguing name, not only because of the work he did with Carson Wentz, but because of the work he did in Derek Carr's rookie season, which I thought was promising. He's another guy with an NFL experience who could probably put together a pretty good staff. Mike McCarthy's another guy. We'll see what happens with the Packers. If they don't make the playoffs, I think he's gone. I think he'll be available. He's another guy who, has a lot of experience. Clearly the Jets, would be interested in interviewing him. He's a play caller, so is he a guy that can get the best out of Sam Darnold? And really, that's what you're talking about here. And I know you touched on it when you asked the question about going on the offensive side of the ball. If the Jets do, in fact, make a change, they're going to hire an offensive-minded guy. I don't think there's any doubt. I think that's a virtual certainty. They will not be hiring another defensive coordinator or defensive-minded head coach. It's going to be an offensive-minded guy. And there are other guys that haven't been talked about, and unfortunately, I hate to do this to you guys. I'm not going to tell you who a couple of those guys are. There were two guys who I think. Yeah, I think there are two guys. One guy who might be head coaching material. One guy who's clearly not head coaching material, but he'd be an incredible offensive coordinator. Regardless, these two guys, they're young guys. They have NFL experience. And these are two guys who I think would be awesome for Sam Darnold's development.
This must be in an article or something.
If I had to guess, well, I won't.
Well, I'm not going to confirm or deny anything.
Manish won't have to add anything, but if I had to, I don't want to put this.
Can we get a wink?
I'll say this.
Well, I will tell you that their names have not really been circulated. So, I mean, I know you guys know a lot about football, but
I was going to guess Zach Taylor for head coach and Press Taylor for offensive coordinator. But
I can tell you, look, let me tell you something. I grew up in Philadelphia. Press Taylor gets a lot of credit for the Philly special. Press Taylor will not be the next head coach of the New York Jets.
Damn it.
I don't like a guy named Press. I only like my sandwiches pressed or my paninis. Let's talk about basically everything you just addressed led back to one thing, and that was Sam Darnold and his development. So let's talk about right now what Sam Darnold's been doing this year and the guys he's been working with. I think, as you said earlier in the episode, most people did not expect Sam Darnold to come into this Jets organization where they are with the weapons they have, the O-line they have, and light the world on fire. I think Monday Night Football was a glimpse at what Sam Darnold can do at his best as a rookie and something we can build upon. But for the most part this year, Sam Darnold has been bad. I think that's a fair statement. He has not made a lot of really good decisions. He's made some really boneheaded decisions. And then there's been moments of greatness. And at the same time, I could say that his offensive line has been a huge problem. I think his receivers trying on the field, and basically exception to Quincy Enunwa, it seems, who tries on almost every play. I mean, Terrell Pryor was jogging routes. Jermaine Kearse doesn't know when he's out of bounds anymore. Robbie Anderson, I think, is trying, but seems like Robbie obviously he's got that diva mentality as a wide receiver, and he gets very angry, as we've seen before. He's outlandish, to say the least. I mean, there are obviously problems on this team, but there is talent. So let's talk about this roster and, where you think we're going to fill some holes here. Because, Sam's development is not looking like much of a development right now.
Well, should we talk about, is this the Le'Veon Bell portion of the podcast?
You can.
Kyle's jumping ahead here, but Kyle's very excited to talk about Le'Veon Bell. So
I am.
Given the article that you dropped today, I guess it is appropriate to start talking about 2019 and beyond, and I guess as Kyle.
Well, you need playmakers around this guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, you guys just touched on the talent on the roster. Okay, there's some decent players. I think there's guys who can fill roles on this team. But honestly, how many difference makers, how many game changers are on this offense?
I think Quincy Enunwa. I think right now we could definitely say Quincy Enunwa, Robbie Anderson, and maybe in the future, maybe Eli McGuire and Chris Herndon, because I really think Chris Herndon is developing well.
Okay. Can we give credit, because when you came on, you did sing the praises of Chris Herndon.
You did.
Training camp.
Yes, and look, I think he has the potential of being a core piece to the puzzle. But with all due respect, and look, I like Robbie. He's a different kind of guy, but he's actually a very entertaining guy to talk to. If anyone gets a chance to talk to him, he's just very. I don't know. I haven't interacted with that many athletes like Robbie Anderson in my career.
Let's get him on the show. Let's get him on the Jet Take and find out.
Well, look. Here's the thing about Robbie Anderson, and I don't think this is ever going to change, but he doesn't necessarily expound on stuff. So he will be telling you something. He'll get right to the point, and you'll think, okay, what else? And then he kind of just stops his answer, and then you got to follow up with another question. So he's very succinct. I think he is well-intentioned. He does really love the game. I will say that about him. When he says that he's passionate about the game, that's not BS. He really does love the game. Robbie Anderson, with all due respect, is not a game changer. Quincy Enunwa is not a game changer. Are they good pieces? Yes. Look, they are good pieces. They're absolutely. Is there a place for a Quincy Enunwa or a Robbie Anderson on an NFL team? Yes. Are they starters? Absolutely, they're starters. Can they be players in a productive offense? Of course. But I am talking about difference makers. I'm talking about game changers, game breakers. There are not that many of those types of players in the NFL. So when one of them, who is 26, will be 27 in February, who hasn't played in a year, when one of them becomes available and your offense and your supporting cast for the most important player in your franchise is frankly barren, I mean, and again, I'm not saying barren of okay or good players. I'm saying barren of game changers. When you're in that situation and you're not paying your rookie quarterback or your young quarterback for 3 more years, and a player like Le'Veon Bell becomes available, I mean, you should frankly, you should not be a general manager or not be a head coach or really not be a part of football if you're not going to make an aggressive move for that player. Because when does a player like Le'Veon Bell become available? It doesn't happen that often.
I think when they fail 3 drug tests and then don't show up and then hold out for money.
Absolutely. Look, but this is what I will say. It's not breaking news.
I want Le'Veon, to clarify.
Right, yeah,
I want Le'Veon.
It's not breaking news that guys want to get paid and that guys want to make a lot of money. So I don't really care that he wants to make a lot of money. I can think of 100 guys that I've covered who are very talented, special players who won a lot of money. I don't care about that. What I care about, is he going to produce? Is he aloof? Is he a little odd? I've never spoken to Le'Veon Bell, but my understanding is that, he's a little odd. He's a different cat, a different sort of player. But what I find funny, I find it funny that the Steelers players this year have come out and criticized Le'Veon Bell. Because, look, their feelings are hurt. Let's just call it what it is. Yeah. Their feelings are hurt. The guy's an incredible player that really shafted them this year. But did you hear cries of how horrible of a player and teammate he was in the first 5 years when he's ripping up defenses?
I did not. I heard, Le'Veon, when are you signing that extension, buddy?
Exactly. So I take anything that the Steelers players or anybody in the Steelers organization, I take anything that they say right now with a grain of salt. Because, look, I'm not a scout. I'm not a general manager, but I'm blessed with the gift of sight. Yeah. Well, look, you don't have to even be a Twitter scout to watch Le'Veon Bell play and know that he is a special, difference-making type of player. And I said this yesterday, and I'll say it tomorrow. If you and the next day and the day after that, if you have the right offensive mind, the right offensive coach, there's absolutely no reason, and I'm simplifying it, but there is really no reason why Sam Darnold and Le'Veon Bell can't do what Jared Goff and Todd Gurley are doing. And the caveat is this. I think that Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and Andy Reid are the three best offensive minds in football right now. One of them is a veteran. Two guys are younger. So I understand the power of Sean McVay. But what Todd Gurley does is make Robert Woods, he makes Brandon Cooks, who has been a good player in the past, and he made a player like Cooper Kupp effective. Because when you have Todd Gurley, that makes everybody else around you better. The scheme is the other half of it, and that's why I said, look, the Jets need an offensive mind that can scheme up great things for Sam Darnold and Le'Veon Bell. But I don't see any reason why those two guys can't have success at a very similar level as what you've seen out of Goff and Todd Gurley. Because, frankly, everything in a vacuum, I know he's 3.5 years older than Gurley, but if they were the exact same age at the same time, just from a football perspective, I'll take Le'Veon Bell over Todd Gurley. I love Todd Gurley. I love Todd Gurley coming out of college. But I will take Le'Veon Bell over Todd Gurley, and I would take Sam Darnold over Jared Goff. And look, we'll see how it plays out, but just from a pure skill and talent standpoint, you put Todd Gurley and Sam Darnold and pair those guys with Sean McVay, they're having the same type of success. It's year one, so not for Darnold, but when Darnold gets another year or two of experience, they're going to have the same type of success just because of the pure talent that these guys have. So I guess this is a roundabout way of me saying they got to get Le'Veon Bell. It doesn't end with Le'Veon Bell. They have a lot of money, and it goes back to what I said before. If ownership is willing to spend the cash, you've got plenty of opportunity this offseason and in free agency to not only get Bell, but to address an edge pass rusher, to improve your offensive line, to attack different areas of weakness. Because I hear people tell me all the time, well, you got to address the offensive line first. And my response to that is it's not linear. It's not like this is how it works. You have to sign two offensive linemen first before you can sign Le'Veon Bell. It's just free agency is a fluid process. It's a fast-moving week or so, a few days really, when you're talking about the beginning of free agency. So you have to address your needs simultaneously. You can do all of that because the Jets have the cap space and they have the money. Are they willing to spend the money? If they are, they can address all of these areas of need. So why wouldn't you go after Le'Veon Bell unless you think he's A, done, B, dangerously close to being suspended, or C, a guy who's going to pack it in once he gets the money and quits? And, again, anybody who tells you that he's going to pack it in and quits is just looking for reasons not to sign him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you were talking about, kind of like the linear equation of what the Jets need to address. And I do agree the offensive line needs to address, but I feel like instead of reaching like we kind of have in the last off seasons with Ryan Clady, Spencer Long, even to a bit, even though he's in front of the podcast, Kelvin Beachum, we're kind of just, grasping at straws there to fill in. I rather do it the right way. So that leads me to the question, is there any under-the-radar free agents right now that people aren't talking about that maybe the Jets would be interested in or maybe you think would be a good fit for the Jets?
Well, there's one, but there's no chance, at least I don't think there's any chance that he'll shake free from Dallas, is DeMarcus Lawrence.
DeMarcus Lawrence?
Yeah. I can't imagine that Jerry Jones would let – they could franchise him. I think they could sign him to a long-term deal. I think that's ultimately going to happen. But if he ever hit the open market, that's a guy that the Jets would go very aggressive at. They will go hard at him. They would probably they obviously would have a lot of competition for his services, but he's a player who I think would be incredible, not only for the Jets, but for any team that gets him. We'll see about Jadeveon Clowney. He's an interesting guy who might be available. Is he worth the investment?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. So if they don't get those guys, or if they're not available, the fallback option that I know that they're going to go after is Dante Fowler. I don't know what his market is, frankly. It's way too early. I haven't really discussed that with guys on other teams, but I don't know what his market value would be. But they are going to address the edge pass rusher. They will have an upgrade at that position. I just don't know if it's going to be a slam dunk, like a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence, or it's going to be someone, a few tiers lower, like a guy like Dante Fowler. That's TBD. But they're going to address that. I can't tell you who the free agent centers are going to be, or who the guard.
Matt Paredes right now is the big one.
Yeah, look, they're going to need a center. They're going to need a guard. Probably going to need a tackle. So 2 or 3 offensive linemen. Wide receivers are going to be cheap because if you look at the caliber of wide receivers, a guy like Devin Funchess jumps to mind. A guy I like, I don't necessarily know if the Jets like. Maybe they do. If you want to stretch the field and if you want to you're going to have Robbie Anderson back because he's a restricted free agent. He's going to be $3 to $4 million, depending on what tender level you give him. I think if he's a first-round restricted free agent tender, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $4+ million. If he's a second-round restricted free agent tender, I believe last year it was $2.9 million, so roughly $3 million. So he's going to be cheap. So I don't know if you want to bring in the guy that I'm about to say, but I like Tyrell Williams from the Chargers.
Big fan on this podcast. We're big fans.
Yeah, I like that guy. I don't know if the Jets would be interested, but again, there's not a dynamic player at the skill position except Le'Veon Bell. He's a million times better than anyone who's available, and you have the resources. And when you look at the other teams that have the money, the Browns are not going to sign him. So let's take him out. The Browns aren't going to sign him. I can tell you with great assurance that the Colts, I would be stunned, frankly. I guess it's possible, but I don't believe that the Colts are going to sign him. So that leaves a team like the Jets, of course. Philadelphia is extremely aggressive. Howie Roseman has been extremely aggressive in the last 2 years. They've been going running back by committee, even dating back to last year when they won the Super Bowl. But their running game has really suffered and struggled this year. They're kind of piecing it together with guys like Josh Adams and Corey Clement. So I think that Philadelphia would be a team that would be interested in Le'Veon Bell. But again, I don't think there's a team that's really interested in Bell that could offer more than the Jets could. So I'm going to be screaming about this for 4 months. If they don't, and I don't want to criticize them if they don't get Le'Veon Bell because you don't know what the ultimate, price tag is going to be for him. But I'll find out fairly easily what the Jets' offer was, and if the Jets' offer wasn't aggressive or strong, that would be disappointing because that means you're not trying to win. Because
you might need to charge that get Mike Maccagnan fired.
No, and look, I got a lot of respect for Mike Maccagnan. It's not personal, but I'll go back to words of wisdom from, believe it or not, Rex Ryan earlier in the week when he was
hard to believe.
he was setting everyone ablaze. He was firing everybody left and right. But when he specifically spoke about Maccagnan, he said, well, this guy always talks about the future. The future, the future, the future. Look, there's a lot of value in building for the future. I completely agreed with them tearing it down and starting to build a proper foundation. However, I don't think that fans or players or coaches should sign up for, we're going to be great in 2025. We're going to be great in 2030. That's too long. It's been 3 years. We're talking about year 4 of the rebuild. The time to win and be a competitive playoff team is 2019. They've got the resources. They've got the money. They've got another draft coming up. It'll be probably a top 5 or 6 pick again. So the one thing I'll say about Mike Maccagnan that I've been critical of is that I think that he has not put his foot on the gas, as much as he should. I think he's been a little bit too plodding, a little bit too methodical. I think he needs to be more aggressive, and I think there needs to be a little bit more sense of urgency. I'm not saying slap it all together and sign a bunch of 30-year-olds in free agency, but you really do have to pick up the pace here because nobody wants to build for 2025. That's too long from now. You've got to win, and you've got to start winning in 2019.
Yeah, and I'm a little disappointed. The one name I was hoping to hear that I didn't hear is the one and only S-Money, Sheldon Richardson.
I totally forgot about Sheldon Richardson. I completely forgot about Sheldon. That's right.
I really want him back.
Agent, right? He's on a 1-year prove-it deal.
So bad. It's not even funny. I'm not even joking. I want Sheldon Richardson back on this team. I want him and Leo clunking arms together again.
Yeah, let's see let's see what happens with the coaching staff, because dynamics change when you bring in new coaches. I don't know who the new coaches are going to be, if they're going to be new coaches. If there are, I don't know what their preferences are. I will say that Sheldon Richardson loved playing in this area, and I know that he would not be averse to coming back. But with Sheldon Richardson, you can't. No hometown discounts or no discounts for Sheldon Richardson. Anyone who's been around Sheldon, I've been around Sheldon a long time. I love Sheldon. I got to be honest with you. I love that guy. He's not giving anybody any discounts. So if you're willing to pay the money, he's willing to listen.
Fast and Furious. Okay, a few more questions, Manish, and then we promise we'll let you go. Jamal Adams made a comment this week talking about. I guess we'll go back a few weeks. He talked about how the culture had changed, and over the offseason he talked about how last year there were, a bunch of, I guess losers on the team and guys who didn't really, do everything they could have to win. He was asked to reevaluate the quote. We talked about how this year was different. He was asked to reevaluate the quote this week, and he said, no, really, it hasn't changed. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, can you give us any insight on the vibe and the energy in the locker room? Have things changed at all, or have the Jets over the past 4 weeks regressed into the team that they were towards the end of 2017 and to, in a much farther distant memory, the team that was here in 2016?
Well, this is what I'll say about Jamal Adams. The question was from Maggie Gray. She read a quote that he gave Tyler Dunn from Bleacher Report, referring to what it was like when he came into the league. And then I believe her direct question was, well, have things changed? And he said he didn't want to sugarcoat it, right, and things haven't changed. But he did make it clear that he wasn't saying that there were players who have quit. And I think that's what he was saying in that initial Bleacher Report story, that players had quit. So I think that is an important piece of his answer. So you really got to listen to not only his answer to that question, but the entire interview. He basically reiterated what he had said over the past month or so, really during this losing streak, about his frustration. I mean, he is such a great influence in that locker room, and I think he knows that he can't make everyone in that locker room feel the same way that he does, but he's going to hold people accountable. And I had a really good discussion with Jamal about a week or so ago, and I told him this, that I had heard from several people, and I thought this was fascinating. During halftime of games, and I'm not talking about this last game, but during the course of the season, he has held not only teammates accountable at halftime, but he has held coaches accountable. And on the surface, you might think, wow, who does this guy think he is? I mean, that's really potentially destructive, right? Everyone who's told me this, I've heard it from 3 different people. Everyone who told me this said it wasn't done in any kind of divisive manner. There is something about Jamal Adams' personality in which he can hold players and, more importantly and more interestingly, coaches accountable at halftime that is productive, not counterproductive. And I don't know how he does it. I mean, I'm around the guy enough, and I get a good sense of about the positive vibe that he brings. But I think that's a special quality and a rare quality of any player, let alone a second-year player, where you feel comfortable enough, where you can say those types of things in the heat of battle to coaches and players and have them be receptive toward it. So I think he also said, and just getting back to the WFAN interview, I think he also said that, and he said as much before, is that, he can do his part and do as much as he can to try to lift everybody up. But ultimately, each individual person has to want to play for themselves, want to play for their teammates, want to play for the New York Jets, for Todd Bowles. That's not something that you can force upon a player. Now, are there players who have quit? That's a tough thing for me to say. It really is based on conversations I've had privately with people. Do I think that people have quit? No, I don't think that people have quit. What I do think, however, is that if you aren't performing for whatever reason, you should not be playing. I don't think it matters if you make $20 million this year or if you make league minimum. You should not be playing if you're not producing. And look, I don't want to single out anybody, and I think it's unfair to really go too hard after Trumaine Johnson. But I'm going to say, look, Trumaine Johnson's been rusty. He's been gone for 5 weeks. You never want to bash a guy who's been injured because you don't know the severity of the injury. I don't think it's fair to speculate on the severity of an injury. If a guy is hurt and he can't play for 5 weeks, then you take him at his word. But if he is playing and he is starting like he was last week against Buffalo, you can't give up a 47-yard play on the first play from scrimmage.
Yeah.
You can't do
like
that.
Jordan Woods or somebody.
Yeah, against Robert Woods, an undrafted guy out of Alabama. I think he was a teammate of Ardarius Stewart, actually. But you can't.
More productive now.
Yeah, look, I just don't think you can do that. Now, you're not going to bench the guy after one play, right? You're not going to bench him after during the course of his first game back unless he says that he's hurt. But if he is healthy, you play him. Now, that being said, when they play the Patriots after the bye week, if Jermaine Johnson is getting beat, you got to bench him. You got to put somebody else in. I don't care that he was the prize free agent signing. I don't care that he's making $20+ million this year and $34 million guaranteed. That doesn't matter at this stage of the game. No matter whether it's him, whether it's Isaiah Crowell, who's had the most misleading 4.8 yards per carry through 10 weeks that I have ever seen in my career. The guy has played 10 games. If you look at his stats, it says he's averaging 4.8 yards a carry. Well, you know what? He had a franchise record 219 yards one week. He had 100 yards in week 1. That's 2 games. Two really good games, 2 great games, right? The other 8 games, 89 carries, 2.6 yards a carry. That's horrific. I mean, that is absolutely horrific. In 8 of the 10 games, the guy is averaging 2.6 yards a carry. That's not good enough. I know the Jets brought him in to be their lead guy. That's not good enough. So if he continues to play like that, you sit that guy, and then you make the tandem Eli McGuire and Trenton Cannon. And that's just what Todd Bowles needs to do. That stuff, like the fact that, and again, this isn't personal towards Isaiah Crowell. He's a reasonably nice guy. I don't know him particularly well, but I've never had a crossword with the man. But 2.6 yards a carry in 8 games, that's garbage. It's not terrible. What's worse than terrible? Garbage. It's junk. I mean, that's you can find a guy off the street tomorrow who could average you 2.6 yards a carry over the course of 8 games. So it's just things like that. It doesn't matter what you thought the player was going to be entering the season. If they are not producing at this point with 6 games to go, you give him give him a clipboard, you put him on the bench, you give a younger guy an opportunity to play and try to prove his worth. And I really hope that that's what Todd Bowles does over the remaining 6 games at every position.
Yeah, you talked about the beginning of the interview. You talked about the lack of in-game adjustments. Why hasn't a guy like Elijah McGuire, who's clearly shown the ability to get more than 2 yards a carry, who's shown quite promising ability to at the very least be a change of pace back, but potentially more in this league? Why has he not played more than a guy like Crowell, or even a guy like Chris Herndon getting reps over guys like Sterling or Tomlinson and Leggett? Is this, again, go back to the lack of in-game adjustments that this coaching staff has just struggled with? Is there a concrete reason? Does Bowles just favor veterans? I mean, is there any sort of explanation for this at all?
Well, McGuire's played 2 games, and look, in fairness to Jeremy Bates and Todd Bowles, McGuire has actually outsnapped Isaiah Crowell in each of those 2 games. So he's been on the field. The touches have been more towards Crowell, something like, 55%, 45%. So Crowell has had more touches in the 2 games that McGuire has been back, but just from a snap standpoint, in each of those games, Eli McGuire has had more snaps. So you're going to see him on the field. You're never going to get a situation where you're going to have a 3-down back. That's not how this offense operates. That's not what they want to do. But I do think that not only the snaps, but the touches should be tilted toward McGuire for the remaining 6 games, as long as he proves that he's capable of handling it and he produces. Jeremy Bates said a couple weeks ago that he loves Eli McGuire's pass pro, so that's not going to be an issue that keeps him off the field. I would anticipate McGuire, being the quote-unquote lead back. Again, that doesn't mean he's going to get every touch, but I would anticipate him being the lead back over the last 6 weeks. He's only played 2 games, but clearly the alternative, Isaiah Crowell, has not earned anything, and that's why I would anticipate McGuire playing more. In terms of whether Bowles favors veterans, I think typically the answer to that question is yes, but I think it's really about trust. A perfect example is Rashard Robinson. Rashard Robinson has a lot of talent. He's got a lot of ability. The issue with Rashard Robinson, I haven't written about it. I kind of danced around it, but I'll tell you guys. The issue with Rashard Robinson is his ability to absorb the game plan. And that's really what it comes down to. And there's been a tendency in practice, from everything that I've been told, when things kind of break down, he tends to, for lack of a better word, panic, maybe freelance a little bit. And I don't know if that's, solely because he's not fully prepared, but, it's hard to fault Todd Bowles for making a guy like Rashard Robinson inactive, for example. When you think to yourself, well, why is he inactive? I mean, the guy's got a lot of ability. He had a good preseason. I think, if memory serves, Todd Bowles actually commended Rashard Robinson for coming back like a pro and handling his business the right way. And I think that's all true. In fact, I know that's all true. But the one hang-up for a player like Rashard Robinson is that the coaches, frankly, don't trust him. They're not to the point where they can trust him, because if things kind of break down, or if there is an adjustment, they don't trust that he's going to be in the right place at the right time, because in practice he has shown them that he isn't in the right place, that he does kind of freelance or panic when things aren't necessarily, as planned or go to script. So it's hard to fault Todd Bowles for not playing a guy that he doesn't necessarily trust because of mistakes that have happened during the course of the week. But at the same time, they're 3-7. He's a young, talented player that they did, trade for. So why not give him an opportunity to prove that he's not going to make those mistakes on Sundays like they've seen during the course of the week?
I think that's a good tidbit there, and that makes a lot of sense as why we would sign him and use him a lot in practice and then almost see nothing of him in games. Honestly, maybe I've seen him for 2 or 3 snaps. I can't even really remember him going out there a lot. But we have to ask this question, and I know there are going to be some people who like billboards and planes that might capitalize on this, but we got to know, is the tank back on? And if not, are we trending in the right direction?
Well, here's the problem. You cannot tank for Bosa. Because if you could tank for Nick Bosa, if you were within reach for Nick Bosa, I would have no problem with fans wanting to do that, because Nick Bosa, as long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to be a special player in this league. And, oh, by the way, the Jets kind of need somebody at his position.
Yeah.
So I just don't think
right?
What's that?
It makes sense, right? I mean, perfect sense.
Yeah, they're not going to get high enough in the draft, unfortunately.
Yeah, the Raiders suck too much, basically.
Yeah, frankly, the Jets, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but the Jets are too good.
Yeah, they're too good to get a generational player.
Right, so they're not going to be in striking distance for Nick Bosa. So, let's look at the schedule. Let's just be honest. They're playing Brady twice. They're not going to win those games unless Brady doesn't play in Week 17. And even if they don't play in Week 7, even if he doesn't play in Week 17, I kind of feel like the Jets are still going to lose. So they got Brady twice. They got Aaron Rodgers. They do have Buffalo. Unfortunately, the game's on the road, and as you guys are fully aware, nothing is guaranteed on the road with this team, no matter how bad the opponent is. And even if there is a revenge factor because of what happened last week, they go on the road against Tennessee. And unfortunately for the Jets, Tennessee kind of seems to be finding their rhythm, and Marcus Mariota finally has feeling back in his fingers, and he's playing like a much better quarterback than he was earlier in the year. So that's not a guarantee. And then you got home against the Texans. Texans are in first place. Do I think they can win that game? Yes, I do. Would I be surprised if they won that game? No, I wouldn't. But that's not a layup either. So, I mean, they could try and they could play hard and give max effort and still go 0-6. To be honest with you, I think it'd be a miracle if they went 3-3. I don't think they're going to go 3-3. I would hope, just for the sake of the people in the building. Like I said earlier, I kicked this off. I got a lot of respect for people in that building, in the locker room, all levels of the organization, the coaching staff as well. I don't want them to go 0-16. I want them to see some success, find some success over the remaining part of the season. But what's realistic? 2-4, maybe 2-4. That would put them at wow. That put them at 5-11 for a third consecutive year. So I don't know if they
pick six.
Yeah. I don't think they need to actively tank. I think when it's all said and done,
they'll do it themselves.
They're going to have a pretty high draft pick in 2019.
Okay, so if we're not tanking, we're going to play the media game here with you. I know you probably know it pretty well yourself. They're not tanking. They must be going in the right direction. They must be doing something right then. Is there anything we're doing right?
Yeah, they have Sam Darnold.
All right. Anything else? I mean,
they have Jamal Adams.
They do. They do have those two players. I think you have a solid point there.
Yeah, this is an interesting question, an interesting point. I've spoken to people inside the building about this a bunch of times. I find it fascinating. So Jamal Adams is a safety. He's unquestionably the leader of the defense, and as of right now, he's unquestionably the leader of the team. My position has always been that Sam Darnold ultimately needs to be the leader of the New York Jets. He's not ready for that because he's 21. He's a rookie. I think he's still trying to find his way and his place. But ultimately, I think there's a problem if Sam Darnold is not the leader of your franchise for the next decade. And again, that doesn't take anything away from Jamal Adams, because Jamal Adams is, I know that people in the building wish that there were 53 Jamal Adams in that locker room. It's not practical. I think Jamal Adams is an awesome player, is an awesome influence, an awesome personality, and ultimately going to be a superstar player in this league for a very long time. But he cannot be the leader of your team. The leader of your team, he can be the leader of your defense, and he will be for as long as he's a Jet. But Sam Darnold needs to be the leader of the New York Jets in 2020, 2021, and all throughout until 2030. He has to be the leader. Otherwise, there's a problem, because every great quarterback in this league is the leader of not only their offense, but their team. And if he's not the leader of the team, there is a big problem. So I think that's just something that's interesting to me, only because, I've been around Darnold for whatever it's been, 6 months. I think he has those leadership traits. I think he ultimately will become that. But right now it's a safety, and I mean that's not what championship teams have. They don't have safeties. And again, no disrespect to Jamal Adams, because I respect Jamal Adams, frankly, more than anybody not only in the locker room but in the organization, for everything that he brings, everything that he's about, everything he stands for. But Sam Darnold needs to be the leader of this team for the next decade.
Yeah, as you touched on, that's definitely something that Jets fans are going to be watching. As far as what they should watch for the next 6 games for Sam Darnold, I guess first of all, is he going to be healthy for the game against the Patriots? Personally, I might have tickets to that game. I'm deciding if it's worth it to go to the game. Manish, I don't know if you can give any sort of inside scoop or anything, but
well, this is an inside scoop. This is an outside scoop. He's out of a walking boot. Okay, so that's step one. This is really about pain tolerance and soreness. Anyone who's had a foot strain or foot sprain, I'm not a doctor, so I think strain is technically a tendon, sprain is technically a ligament. The bottom line is it's about pain tolerance. What's that? Yeah, no, I believe that's what it is. I think that's what it said on WebMD when I looked it up like a week or so ago. But the point is, it's about soreness, and yes, can he manage the pain? Of course he can. But if he's not 100%, the Jets would be foolish to play him. I mean, no disrespect to guys like you that have tickets to the game. I know you want to see Sam Darnold, but there's no reason to risk playing him if he is not fully healthy. And they knew when he suffered the sprain, they knew he wasn't going to play against Buffalo. They were hopeful he would play against the Patriots. I spoke to people who were pessimistic about his availability, but then they did give you a caveat and say, hey, look, I'm hopeful he'll play. I don't think he'll play, but let's see how he feels coming off the bye week. And that's kind of where the Jets are. They're going to see how he feels on Monday when he returns to the building, whether he's ready enough to practice, and if he is, they'll throw him out there. It's really incumbent upon Sam Darnold, to be quite honest with you, to be honest with the doctors and the trainers, because they can't, they can look at an MRI and they can say, look, there's no structural damage here, but they can't know for sure how much pain he's in, if he's in any pain. So he has to be honest with him. I know he's a competitive player, he's a competitive person, but he needs to be 100% honest with the doctors and the trainers, because if he is not fully 100%, it makes no sense for him to try to gut it out or tough it out. That's silly at this point for this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid that they, Sam Darnold suffers another sort of Andrew Luck situation where he just, kind of ignores it, plays on it, aggravates it. Yeah. And this is something that could potentially, go into the spring or whatnot. So last question, I guess, is as I was kind of leading up to there. I mean, I guess I'll wait on the tickets. We'll see if it's worth it.
I'll text you if I find anything out.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep my eye on the injury report as well. I mean, what should Jets fans be watching from Darnold for these last 6 games, or I guess 5 games if he doesn't play against New England? What should they be looking to see for him to take these next steps? Because as Kyle talked about, it's been very up and down, which is what we expected. we knew he was going to have flashes of brilliance, like some of the throws he made against Denver and him bouncing back against Detroit and some of the plays he made against Indianapolis. And then there are the lows that have happened against Miami, all the interceptions. It's been very up and down. It's been a roller coaster. But these last 5-6 games, as a fan, it's the last question because it's the most important thing as we head into year 2. I mean, this year 2 for a quarterback is, especially recently when we've seen the biggest jump. Look at Jared Goff, you look at Carson Wentz, you even look at a guy like Mitchell Trubisky, who a lot of people had kind of pegged as a mediocre, maybe even a bust. Certainly the last few games. No, I'm not talking about Kyle's a big Mitch Trubisky fan. Certainly the last few games, Mitch Trubisky has been playing terrific, and I guess you could throw Pat Mahomes in there, although he's, if you ask Ben Simmons, he's a rookie. Essentially, what should the Jets be looking for for Sam Darnold to close out his end of the season, and as he heads into potentially a new regime, how can he carry that momentum into his second season and build on it?
He needs to play with more confidence, which is something I don't think I would have told you 2 months ago, because he's an extremely confident player. Even when he was throwing all those picks at USC, he was playing with confidence. That's what you want to see. I don't frankly care if he throws 15 more interceptions over the last 6 games. I don't care if the final number breaks Peyton Manning's record. That is irrelevant to me, because if he's playing with confidence, that's a win. That's a win for the franchise. You want him to be decisive in his reads. It's interesting because when you look at how his season has unfolded, the Jets played it kind of close to the vest in the sense that they really only wanted him to focus on the intermediate and short area of the field in the first month or so of the season, because that's where he felt comfortable. So that's why Robbie Anderson wasn't really involved early in the season. That deep portion of the field was essentially, out of the equation. And that's why when I had mentioned earlier in the Cleveland game, there are plenty of times in the Cleveland game and the first Miami game, those first 2 weeks, guys were running free, to be honest with you, at that next level, at the deep portion of the field. He just wasn't looking in that area. And when he felt more comfortable stretching the field and stretching his vision, the next thing became, well, you got to be decisive in your reads. And you've heard him say this. It's not just publicly. He has said this privately as well, just being more decisive in his progressions, meaning don't hang on to your first read too long. Because if you hang on to your first read too long and he is covered, that screws up your second read. There's a ripple effect there, because then your second read's not open. Then your third read might not be open. And then you force passes, and that leads to having a lack of confidence. And then when you don't have confidence, you don't play with confidence, you don't see the field as well as you saw it when you were playing with confidence. So you can play with confidence and throw 3 picks. Those two things can happen. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have a bad stat line and still play with confidence. And that, to me, is what the Jets want him to do. It's kind of like when Peyton Manning was a rookie. He said, look, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to learn what I can get away with and what I cannot get away with. And, sometimes if I try to throw in a tight window and I get picked off, okay, it's a pick and maybe we lose the game. But I'm going to benefit from it in the off season, going into my second season, third season, fourth season. You just can't have a situation over the last month or so where Sam Darnold finishes his rookie season and is unsure of himself, because he's got the ability. He knows he's got the ability. He has to play with confidence, because every week is going to be different. There are teams that are going to throw different wrinkles at him. The Dolphins threw different wrinkles at him in Week 9 than they did in Week 2. That's to be expected. But he's got to learn from those mistakes, and within the course of a game, he just can't get apprehensive. And I thought that's what happened in his last game against Buffalo. He made a terrible read. He did not see the field well at all on his first interception, in which he was trying to, I guess, squeeze it into Deontay Burnett, who was triple covered, and Kiko Alonso was drifting back that entire play. He just had a blind spot. He didn't see him, and that early interception really hurt his confidence. And that's okay if it happens in isolated times. You just can't have that become the norm, because, again, this is a player who feeds off of confidence, and even when he was making mistakes in college, he didn't lose that confidence. So he's going to make mistakes over the final 5 or 6 games, however many games he plays, but he needs to play with confidence, and he needs to be decisive and look at his first read. If it's not there, you move on to the second read. And maybe when he watches the tape, he'll find out that he went off of his first read too soon, and that guy eventually got open. That's okay if he connects with his second read. The issue, again, is that if he waits too long on the first read, then there is a chain reaction in which his second and third reads might not be open, and that's when he gets into trouble. So that's what I want to see out of him. I'll get that out of him. I mean, he won't say it publicly, but believe me, I'll find out what's going on over the last 5 weeks in terms of his decision-making and his confidence level. And that's what you need. Because, again, the final stats, I don't even know what they are now. 14 interceptions, I don't care about that. I don't care if he throws for 30 picks. That means nothing to me. That's irrelevant to me. It's about playing with confidence, being decisive, and understanding what you're seeing on the film so you don't make the same mistake 2 or 3 times, and using that reservoir of knowledge over the course of 2018 to your benefit in 2019 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see that potentially, even though the Jets, are 3-7, it could potentially benefit Darnold, knowing that he doesn't really have the pressure of winning and losing games. Obviously, that's still the objective, but as you talked about, he can take those chances and put balls into tight windows, and if it costs him the game, that sucks, but that's a learning experience. Shut up, Kyle. It's a learning experience, and it's one of those things where he can learn and grow from it.
Manish, look, screw the stats. Just screw the stats. When it comes to Sam Darnold, I don't care what the stats are. He frankly shouldn't care about the stats. It's about learning and developing, and that's what's most important, not only for Darnold, but for the New York Jets in 2019, 20, and hopefully through 2030 with this kid.
I could not agree more, and let's hope they attempt to surround him with some weapons. Hopefully, Le'Veon Bell, as I think we're all in agreement there. Manish, we could not have asked for a better guest for our 100th episode. You were on the show, I think, 2 or 3 months ago, and you were fantastic then, and you're fantastic now. One of the most in-depth and I guess knowledgeable people that we've had the chance to talk to, and so we really appreciate the time you've taken to sit down and talk some football and break down the functional mess of a team.
Mess of a podcast.
And dysfunctional mess of a podcast as well. Yeah. I would assume that anybody who's following us is most likely following you, but we'll give you the chance to plug where our listeners can follow you on Twitter, where they can read your work, and any articles that you want to plug as well. I guess you can do that now.
It's nydailynews.com. I'm sure people are familiar with that, and Mehta, NYDN is my Twitter handle, so I'm sure your listeners probably already know that. But I appreciate you having me on. Here's to at least 100 more podcasts. Juggling schoolwork and podcasts is pretty cool. I wish I would have done that when I was in school, but like I said, when we started this podcast, you guys are way ahead of the game. And I hope you guys use this, and hopefully it helps you moving forward whenever you guys are done school.
Soon for me. I'm in my senior year. Almost there. Applications have been submitted.
Just so you know, it doesn't get any easier in college.
I know
Manish, that. Really quickly, you're from Philadelphia. I believe you're a 76ers fan. Jimmy Butler's first game with the Sixers is happening right now. Do you have any thoughts on what he brings to that team?
Yeah, he brings intensity and production on both ends of the floor. I love the trade, and you're right. I'm a diehard Sixers fan. They are. I think they're a viable contender to win the East, but I was ecstatic when they made the trade. I love Dario Saric, nice player, role player. Robert Covington, extremely overrated, so I wasn't sad to see him go. But I wanted LeBron James. It didn't happen. I wanted them to trade for Kawhi Leonard. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
But Jimmy Butler's a pretty. Yeah. Oh, the Khalil Mack story. We didn't even get into that. Maybe another time. I can tell you exactly what happened.
We'll save it another time. We'll save it for another time. We're gone like an hour and a half. You've given us every
that's a great story. So maybe we can do that another time. I got a great story of the details on what happened with that.
Oh, I actually have a question. Since bang out the 76ers question, have you got your friend of the podcast shirt yet, or is it still shipping?
I did not. Do you guys give out friend of the podcast T-shirts?
I mean, you've given us probably 2 of our most productive. Based on Twitter right now, this is definitely going to be our most downloaded episode right now. Your phone's probably buzzing a little more than usual, to say the least. So you should definitely get a friend of the podcast shirt.
Kyle's trying to design them.
Do you have windbreakers? I prefer a windbreaker if you have that.
Windbreaker. I might charge for a windbreaker. Those things are expensive.
Windbreaker? No, windbreaker. You know what? I would wear a friend of the podcast.
I will take any free stuff. I am shameless in that respect. If it's free, it's for me.
As long as you wear it in another Jamal, if Jamal Adams pats you on the back after another good question, and you're wearing a friend of the podcast shirt, I'll send you any free shirt you want.
Okay, how about this? Let's come to an agreement here. If you give me a friend of the podcast shirt, I will wear it into the locker room, and I will have somebody take a picture of Jamal and me together. How about that?
Fantastic, bro. I'm going to my local printing shop. So I'm gonna make sure this is high quality and everything. I got like a cheap one myself that I made with like one of those Cricut printers. Like, I'll go get this professionally made right now.
All right, done deal.
I think we can find a guy.
Yeah.
Manish, thank you so much for joining us. We'll definitely hope to have you on it at some point in the off season, so you can break down everything that's going on. Hopefully with Le'Veon Bell and other free agents and head coaches and whatnot, and I guess at that point you can tell us that Khalil Mack story. But again, thank you so much for coming on our show. We really appreciate the amount of time you've spent with us, and we hope you have a great week. Enjoy your bye week, your vacation, and hopefully the 76ers and Jimmy Butler get a win tonight.
Thanks, I appreciate it, guys. Enjoy Thanksgiving, and reach out anytime.
Thanks for being on. Happy Thanksgiving.
Again, that was Manish Mehta from New York Daily News. I
got chills. Yeah, that was a great episode.
I think anytime you get a guest where you could just ask a question and sit back and just absorb
for like 10 minutes, it's fantastic.
And it's not even just like you let them run with it and they just go with it. It is Manish just brings absolute knowledge to our show.
I mean, the Ardarius Stewart thing alone with like.
Well, there's so much to unpack there. From so it sounds like Bowles
is gone.
It sounds like Mack will be retained. Talking about the dynamic that Mack had with the coaching staff and the Ardarius Stewart stories you touched upon. Just so much there to unpack and a lot I think that Manish provided our listeners. And he certainly gives. When we started this podcast, I think I was 16 and you were 15. I mean, Manish, or 15 and 14, something like that. Manish is just one of those guys who's just given our show any sort of credibility. And the fact that I wouldn't say we're breaking news through him, but we're at least
we kind of just did
breaking topics. Like, you know what I mean? Getting people intrigued with what Manish is saying. And so we are eternally thankful to Manish for both times. When he came on over the summer, he did equally as good of a job, and he might have just topped it now with talking about the state of the Jets right now. I'm bummed we didn't get into the Khalil Mack story. It was just because. I think he wrote an article on it, but I'm again, as we talked about, we'll probably have Manish on in March or so, right around free agency. And I'll certainly ask him there. I'll put it in my notes. But I believe he wrote an article on it. But it's just one of those things where you want to pick like 10, 15 really good questions and then just let him go and talk and just lay down stories and knowledge and insight. And it's really awesome to see from our perspective. And so our bummed we didn't get into Khalil, but I guess he's a Chicago Bear, so it doesn't really matter. But the notes on Bowles, Maccagnan, Darnold, and the dynamics and whatnot, just absolutely fantastic stuff. And I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate our 100th published episode. Kyle, I guess we'll wrap it there. We're not necessarily doing callers. I know we have something planned this week, I believe. We do have something planned. We'll drop later this week, more of a fun, less serious thing. But it's interesting for sure, and I'll give Kyle all the credit on that one. So stay tuned for that. This episode will be up tonight. I'm not going to waste a day of content like this. And Jesus Christ, Kyle. I'm glad you kept it together while Manish was on. But again, a big thank you. You made one joke and I just shut it down so quickly. It was like Kembe Mutombo. I forget what you even said. I just said shut up when you kept moving. Yeah. Whereas in the past, I may have stopped and acknowledged it. To something I said. You're right. Yeah. You insinuated something, but Kyle, I guess the one person I didn't think at the beginning was you for doing the show with me.
Are we going to do this right now?
And being there when I've been inconsistent and always, I will. The thing I'll give Kyle credit for is half of it is just showing up, and Kyle is always here. Kyle is always here and ready to contribute. Kyle and I may have disagreements on and off the air, but at the end of the day, Kyle, you're like a brother to me, and I couldn't think of anybody I'd rather run the podcast with. Outside of maybe Michael Nania, but outside of him, okay, maybe Manish, but I'm just kidding. I couldn't think of it. Truly, I really have enjoyed running this podcast with you, and I look forward to hopefully another 100 episodes. Hopefully this time with a little more consistency. But I guess we'll wrap it there. Kyle, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say to our listeners or whatnot about having 100 episodes.
Yeah.
I guess the mic is yours.
Yeah, obviously 100 episodes, super special. I'm going to try not to get emotional because I know we're going to do a lot more episodes and you and I will be around for a long time, either with the Jet Take or just, around and
poisoning.
Yeah, I don't know. Something might happen. Who knows? But 100 episodes is, special. Ben, we've had our ups and downs, obviously, as the listeners know. We get into consistent fights, but we're always here. It's like when parents, save the divorce until the kid goes to college. I mean, it's one of those scenarios, and, maybe the kid being gone, the empty nest is going to help us. So here we are, 100 episode mark. Our listeners are fantastic. Our fans are fantastic. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you guys, listen or interact with us. We appreciate it every time you like or retweet. I'm holding some tears right now, if I'm being honest. It's just something, this was our baby, and you guys have raised it with us. So thank you for 100 episodes, and thank you guys for listening. Thank you to TOJ. Even to a small bit, thank you to Tyson and Joe.
Yeah,
Let's Talk Jets. Kevin in there. I guess even,
for sure.
Yeah, and Jay to a point. They were responsible for helping us promote basically probably like the first 30 or 40 episodes. Obviously, we're not on the best terms with them, but,
We're all Jets fans at the end of the day. And I will say, again, thank you to those guys, and as well as the guys from TOJ. We'll end the Love Fest here. But I will say, if you are interested, and for some reason have time, if you scroll all the way to the bottom of our feed, and I just challenge you to listen to our first or second episode, just listen to the difference and Kyle's voices and how good we are at the show. It's quite interesting for sure. I think the Christian Hackenberg live day 2 of the draft is like our second or third episode. So I implore our listeners to potentially go check that out if they're interested. But again, you can follow us at the Jet Take on Twitter. That's the best place to follow us. You can keep up with our show there. We love tweeting back and forth with you guys and getting into debates and live tweeting the games and everything that's all the shit that's happened with this team and will continue to happen. So make sure you follow us there on Twitter. That's the best place. If you want to listen to our show, go to anywhere you listen to podcasts. You have iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, wherever. Just search up the Jet Take. You'll find our content. And again, as always, you can go to turnonthejets.com for not only our content, but the best Jets content out there. So much, great, written work, other podcasts, and any other, form of Jets content you can think of. There's a shop too. That's probably how we'll start to produce these Friends of the Podcast T-shirts. But yeah, make sure you can go check us out there. As Kyle said, it's been a very fun ride, and we're looking forward to some more episodes. Hopefully, while the Jets are good. I guess if the Jets win a Super Bowl, Kyle, is that when we end the show?
Yeah, that's when I'll end it.
I think we end on a high note. We like John Elway, just retire while it's good. So we could either be here for 2 more years or 100. Who knows? Anyways, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Jet Take. I think this one was one of our best, and a big thank you again to Manish Mehta. We're looking forward to bringing you more episodes. We'll be live next week at 8 o'clock p.m. We'll be taking some callers there. I know we had some callers this week that tried to call in. We didn't take it just because we felt that the hour and a half with Manish was going pretty well, and we didn't want to cut it short at all. But again, thank you to all our listeners. You can call into the show next week. Again, I probably should spit that number out. Live. We try to be live every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. This week was a little different with Manish's schedule, and my schedule has been different in the past. But we are 90% of the time live Wednesday, 8 o'clock Eastern time. We update on Twitter if we're not. But next week we will definitely be on time there. You can call in 515-739-1285. Enter the PIN 261860 with the pound or hash sign, and you can call in and you can give your takes on the state of the New York Jets. Again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Jet Take and all the other 99 if you tuned in for any of them. We really appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. We hope everybody has a safe and sound week. I would say happy Thanksgiving, but we'll be live the day before Thanksgiving, so you guys don't get that luxury. But I guess we're heading into the holiday season, so everybody stay safe. And let's hope that the Jets can tank for Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
And we'll leave you with the best chant in the National Football League. Everybody have a nice week, and go Jets.
The Jets are just good enough at being bad that it's sad.
Wow, that was where we're going to end this? All right.
Yeah. Happy 100.